For the vast majority, yes, it's a relatively low-hanging fruit. And that's just simply because if all you do is maximize the number of conversions in the first 24 hours, you're going to be set. It's not something you need to change or optimize on an ongoing basis.
Right. And how do you approach that with advertisers? Is it simply just looking at their funnel and then identifying, you know, different conversion areas that are
Yeah, for the vast majority, it's looking at their funnel to identify something that has some correspondence or correlation with revenue or purchase. Uh, but in some cases, you might realize there is no event that uh, is revenue linked that happens early on in the funnel. In those cases, my recommendation typically is add an event that could be corresponding to a revenue event. For a couple of games, it could be a starter pack. It's like, hey, so rather than have a relatively high value purchase 3 days in, offer a low value purchase immediately after a user downloads. In fact, a lot of games have started doing that after ATT, and this is the primary reason.
interesting. So they will shift their revenue strategy to give SKAN an earlier event.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. This is, and it's something too, I think we see in fintech, the fact that your primary event might take place outside of that 24-hour period, but some percentage of it does. So what are your thoughts on that, right? Where you might have a KPI, but maybe only 20% of those conversions are seen within the first 24 hours or something like that. Do you still include that, or how do you?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I try to just pick an event that happens as much as possible in the first 24 hours. I think if 20% of events happen in the first 24 hours, I wouldn't have a great deal of conviction that it could correspond to revenues. So that's a tricky situation, right? So, if you said fintech, so maybe you're looking at first sign up, right, or first time depositor. And obviously, because if you have a relatively long onboarding funnel, the first time depositor happens even multiple days down the line. I know fintechs for whom it's 7 to 14 days in. In that case, you just want to pick an upstream event that you feel is a reasonably good proxy. Could just be registration, complete onboarding, if you will, and just take that for the sake of simplicity for now, I would say. Yeah, there is no way around, sort of other corresponding example I can think of is with a lot of subscription apps, if they have a free trial, the trial happens 7 days in, which you're never going to catch. So you just optimize for trials, which even though a lot of trials end up canceling, is a reasonably good predictor of the eventual subscription.
Sure. And there's a big difference between optimizing an event and reporting and measuring it and paying attention to it too. Um, I feel like it's worth experimenting with bidding towards everything and kind of seeing what works, right? There's probably advertisers that could just bid to an install and that's it, versus a downstream event. And that's something we're definitely testing. One of the things with this with Scan 4 though, we're getting these two additional post backs, but it's kind of like, well, what the hell do we do with that? Because they're occurring so much later on in the life cycle. It feels like they're not going to impact optimization and bidding as much as they are just going to be measurement based, right?
Yeah, 100%, right? So I don't see any way the platforms are going to use that for optimization. I would say, they might, the, if let's just say Meta says, so if you were to take an example of a fintech app, your second post back could be, hey, actually signed up and made a high value deposit after 7 days. That's your post back two. The algorithm could ingest that and say, this is a high value user versus a low value user. So I'm sure there's some value the algorithm could get out of it. But because it's so far out in the future and it's also disaggregated, it's also aggregated, sorry. It's also aggregated, and your postback 2 and 3 are just low, medium, high, right? And for all of those reasons, I think it's just going to be very, very limited. For pretty much everybody, I just recommend just think about get the postback 1 right. That's the low hanging fruit. Postbacks 2 and 3, nice if you can get it, but otherwise don't worry too much about it.